I woke up in the recovery room with bandages wrapped around my side, knowing I was alive because of someone I told never to call me again, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, someone I'd spent 29 years pushing away because of one night I couldn't forgive myself for. The nurse checked my vitals with gentle hands, her voice soft when she told me the surgery went perfectly. My new kidney was already working, already filtering the poison that had been slowly killing me for months. I should have felt grateful, but all I could manage was a hollow nod. My brother Marcus sat in the corner chair, his eyes heavy with something I couldn't quite read. When our gazes met, he looked away quickly, fidgeting with the coffee cup in his hands. The silence stretched between us, filled with words neither of us seemed ready to say. It had been over a year since I'd spoken to my son David. Over a year since I'd told him never to call me again, after our last fight about something so small, I couldn't even remember what it was anymore. What I did remember was the look in his eyes when I said it, like I'd taken something precious from him and crushed it right there in my restaurant's kitchen. But even before that final fight, there had been decades of smaller cruelties, moments when I should have chosen love and chose distance instead. I remembered David at 7, running to me with a crayon drawing of our family. In his picture, we were holding hands under a rainbow, both smiling. I barely glanced at it before saying I was too busy, watching his little shoulders slump as he walked away. How many times had I done that? How many times had I let my own pain poison the moments that should have been beautiful? I never imagined the price I'd pay for all those years of pushing him away would be measured in something as precious as life itself. The door opened, and Dr. Martinez walked in with that careful smile doctors wear when they're about to deliver news that will change everything. She pulled up a chair close to my bed, her hands folded in her lap, and I knew whatever she was about to tell me would crack something open inside me. What happened next still makes my hands shake when I think about it. "Diane," she said softly, "your donor wanted to remain anonymous, but there were complications with the paperwork." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Your son David was your kidney donor. He's been on the registry for months, waiting to see if you'd be a match." The words hit me like cold water. David. My David, whom I'd pushed away, whom I'd never been able to love the way a mother should. The son I'd carried for 9 months while hating every kick, every flutter that reminded me of that one terrible night 29 years ago. I was 29 and engaged to Thomas when it happened. We had everything planned. The wedding, the house in Queens, the life we'd build together. But then came that company Christmas party. Too much wine, and a moment of weakness with a man whose name I barely remembered. For one stupid night, I forgot about Thomas, forgot about my future, forgot about everything. When I discovered I was pregnant 6 weeks later, I knew immediately it wasn't Thomas's child. The timeline was all wrong. I could have lied, could have pretended, but the guilt was eating me alive. So I told him the truth, watched his face crumble, watched him take off the ring I'd worn for 8 months. The worst part wasn't losing Thomas. The worst part was losing the version of myself I'd planned to be. The wife, the mother who would love her children fiercely, the woman who had it all figured out. What I didn't know then was that love sometimes comes in the form of sacrifice, so quiet you don't recognize it until it's almost too late. My mother said I was throwing my life away by keeping the baby. My friends said I was crazy for not starting over somewhere new. But I couldn't bring myself to make that choice, so I made another one. I'd have the child, but I'd never let myself forget the cost. David was born on a rainy Tuesday in March, and when the nurse placed him in my arms, I felt nothing but shame. Every time I looked at his face, I saw that Christmas party. I saw my broken engagement. I saw the life I'd thrown away for one stupid night with a man whose last name I never even learned. The nurse kept saying, "Isn't he beautiful?" And all I could think was how much he'd already cost me. I tried to be a good mother on the outside. I fed him, clothed him, sent him to school, helped with homework. But there was always this wall between us, this distance I couldn't bridge. Every time he looked at me with those trusting brown eyes, all I could see was that night, that choice, that moment that cost me everything I'd planned. He was such a careful child, always watching my face for signs of approval. I remember him at 9 bringing home a perfect report card, standing in our tiny apartment kitchen with hope shining in his eyes. I signed it quickly, handed it back, and told him to set the table for dinner. No praise, no celebration, just another day where I failed to give him what he needed. The small moments haunt me most. The Mother's Day orchid he saved for weeks to buy me, I let it die on the windowsill. His basketball jersey number 12 that he showed me with such pride while I counted receipts instead of celebrating with him. He tried so hard to earn my affection. Perfect grades, never getting in trouble, helping in my restaurant from the time he was 12. He'd stay after school to sweep floors and wash dishes, always asking if I was proud of him, always hoping for something I couldn't give. I remember the day he got accepted to college with a partial scholarship. He was 18, tall and handsome, with his father's easy smile and gentle nature. He burst through the restaurant's back door waving the letter, so excited he could barely speak. For a moment I felt something crack in my chest. Pride, maybe, or joy. But then I remembered what his success would cost me, how I'd have to find the money for the rest of his tuition, and the old resentment rushed back in. "That's nice," I said, not looking up from the prep work. "We'll figure out the money somehow." His face fell, but he didn't say anything, just folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. But somehow he still chose to stay close. After graduation with his business degree, he came back to help me expand the restaurant instead of taking a corporate job in Manhattan. He never asked me why I found it so hard to love him. He just kept showing up, kept trying, kept believing that someday I'd come around. Years later, I would discover that faith doesn't always look like what we expect it to look like. The other mothers in the neighborhood would comment on what a sweet boy he was, how lucky I was to have such a devoted son. I'd smile and nod, but inside the guilt twisted deeper. I knew what they'd think if they saw how cold I was at home, how I flinched when he tried to hug me, how I never said the words he desperately needed to hear. Our last fight was so stupid I'm almost embarrassed to remember it. He'd suggested we expand the restaurant's menu, add some of the dishes his grandmother used to make. I snapped at him about changing things that didn't need changing, about him always trying to fix what wasn't broken. But really, I was angry at myself, angry at the way he looked so much like me in that moment, hopeful and determined. "Mom," he said quietly, "I just thought, don't." I cut him off. "Don't think, don't suggest, don't try to manage my life." The words poured out of me like poison. "I'm tired of you always hanging around, always trying to insert yourself where you don't belong." He stood there for a moment, tall and gentle in his server's apron, and something in his face just broke. "What did I ever do to you?" he whispered. "What did I do to make you hate me so much?" I could have taken it back then, could have reached for him, could have said something, anything, to heal the wound I'd just opened. Instead, I turned away and said the words that would haunt me for the next year. "Maybe it's better if you don't come around anymore." The door to my hospital room opened again, and Marcus finally spoke. "He never stopped loving you," he said, his voice thick with tears. "When we found out you needed a kidney, he was the first one tested. Didn't even hesitate." Marcus paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "You know what he said when the results came back positive? He said, 'Thank God, I can finally do something that matters for her.'" But that wasn't the part that broke me completely. "Diane," Marcus continued, "he made me promise not to tell you it was him. He said you'd refuse the surgery if you knew, and he couldn't live with that." His voice cracked. "He said you deserved to live, even if you never wanted to see him again." Marcus stood up, pacing to the window. "He's been waiting in the hospital for 3 days, not eating, barely sleeping. The doctors had to force him to rest. And you know what he keeps asking? Is my mom okay? Is she in pain? Not once has he mentioned what he sacrificed for you." The magnitude of what David had done crashed over me like a wave. While I'd been lying in this hospital bed, angry at the world, angry at my failing body, angry at a life that seemed determined to punish me, my son, the son I'd never been able to love, had quietly given me a piece of himself to save my life. I thought about all the years I'd pushed him away, all the times I'd chosen my pain over his love. I thought about the birthdays when I'd given him practical gifts instead of the affection he craved, the graduations where I'd sat in the audience thinking about my own lost dreams instead of celebrating his achievements. And through it all, he just kept loving me. quietly, patiently, without condition. But what I was about to see in that hospital room would change everything I thought I knew about love and forgiveness. 3 days later, they brought me to his room. David was awake, pale but smiling when he saw me in the doorway. The sight of him hooked up to monitors, his surgical site bandaged, hit me like a physical blow. This was what love looked like, and I'd been too blind, too buried in my own pain, to recognize it. I walked to his bedside on unsteady legs and did something I'd never done in 29 years. I took his hand in mine and held on tight. His fingers were warm, familiar in a way that caught me off guard. "David," I whispered, my voice breaking completely. "I ruined your childhood because I was ashamed of how you were made. I couldn't look at you without seeing my mistake. I couldn't love you because every day you reminded me that I threw away my entire future for one night I'll regret forever." The words hung in the air like a confession I'd held for 29 years. David's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't let go of my hand. "I know, Mom," he whispered. "I've always known, but I kept hoping that someday, loving me would matter more than hating how I got here." "How?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. "How could you know when I didn't even know?" He smiled, that same hopeful smile he'd worn as a little boy. "Because you kept my drawings. All of them. I found them when I helped you move last year. Every crayon picture, every school project, every card I ever made you. You kept them all." That's when I understood the difference between the love I thought I owed him and the love that had been growing quietly in the spaces between my fears and regrets. The love that made me worry when he was 5 minutes late coming home. The love that made me keep every drawing he'd ever made. The love that made me proud when customers complimented his work at the restaurant, even when I never told him so. Sitting there beside his hospital bed, holding the hand of the son who'd saved my life without asking for anything in return, I finally felt what I'd been too afraid to feel for 29 years. It wasn't the instant, overwhelming love the books talk about. It was something quieter, deeper, built on years of his patience and kindness, years of him loving me despite my failures. "I want to make it right," I whispered. "However much time I have left, I want to be the mother you deserved." He smiled again, and in that moment, I saw not the mistake that had derailed my life, but the gift I'd been too stubborn to accept. David wasn't the reminder of my worst night. He was the proof that something beautiful could grow from ashes, that love could survive even when it wasn't returned. During recovery, David told me about Sarah, the woman he loved. "I want her to meet my mom," he said. "The real one." That's when I understood that forgiveness wasn't just about apologizing for the past. It was about choosing to be present for the future. David wasn't just forgiving me for who I'd failed to be. He was inviting me to become who I could still be. When I look at David now, I don't see that night anymore. I don't see the choice that changed everything, or the life I thought I'd lost. I see the man who became my son, not because biology demanded it, but because he chose to love me every single day, even when I couldn't love him back. The scar from my surgery has faded now, but I touch it sometimes and remember, not just the operation that saved my life, but the moment I finally understood that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. It doesn't have to arrive on schedule or follow the rules we think it should. Sometimes it grows slowly, quietly, in the spaces between fear and hope, waiting for us to be brave enough to recognize it. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fanfare and violins. Sometimes it grows in the quiet spaces, in the everyday kindnesses, in the choice to keep trying even when it seems hopeless. Sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to recognize what you've had all along, waiting patiently for you to open your heart. And sometimes, if you're lucky and brave enough to accept grace, you get a second chance to say what truly matters most. "I love you, and I'm grateful every day that you're my son."